Hey everybody, welcome back to coverage here from Amsterdam of the World Championship. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe, and this is Luis Scott-Vargas. How's it going, Luis?
Pretty good, pretty good.
You had a long day in the booth yesterday. How was that for you?
It was awesome. It was really fun watching all the guys play.
There was something else that happened yesterday as well. You had a nice, kind of a life event.
There was a nice announcement. It looks like I'm going to be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, so congratulations for that. I'm sure that all your fans at home are going to be happy to hear that. And also congratulations to William Jensen and Ben Stark.
Yeah, it's awesome that both of them made it as well.
Yeah. Now, so yesterday we had the first full day of the World Championship. 16 of the best players in the world battling it out all day across two different formats.
Yep.
Modern Masters Draft and Standard Constructed. Let's talk a little bit about how Modern Masters went.
Yeah, so you had Ben Stark 3-0ing one of the pods.
With a sweet artifact deck.
Affinity deck where he actually even took Sanctum Gargle over Maloku the Clouded Mirror.
Which is insane, and he's in blue.
Yeah, he was in blue. He had Cryptic Command. I mean, so, that's a pretty tough pick, and there aren't very many drafters in the world who would have made that pick.
No.
Since Maloku is like a 10 out of 10 in power level, but Sanctum Gargle just worked better with Ben's deck.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, Maloku gets mentioned among the top non-sword cards in Modern Masters.
I mean, it's
Draft.
one of the top limited cards of like all time.
Right. So yeah, pretty tough pick there, but it certainly paid off for Ben as he did manage to 3-0 his pod.
Even beating Maloku in the finals out of Brian Kibler. So it wasn't the same Maloku. He actually passed that Maloku to Tom Martell.
Which is interesting because earlier we also had a Maloku mirror. Yeah. The clouded mirror, as
the clouded mirror. Yep.
Yeah, because of the new Legends changes from M14.
Yeah, both players can have one in play.
Yeah, so Martell and Kibler were staring down two Malokus. Yeah. Now, so that's what happened with Modern Masters. Moving over to Standard, we saw. Well, the metagame isn't that diverse here.
Well, yeah, half the field is playing blue-red control. Mm-hmm. 3 different lists, though. Since
which certainly matters.
Yeah, different testing teams with Shahar Shenhar and Tom Martell coming up with one of the lists, Dmitry Budakov with a different list, and then the kind of super team of the Czechs and the Japanese coming up with even a different blue-white-red list.
Right, and so it's interesting to see how those mesh together because, I mean, clearly there's a lot of room in everybody's sideboards to be able to anticipate different matchups, and if you anticipated the mirror, you could prepare accordingly.
Yeah, and we had a number of mirrors that weren't really mirrors, where you had Tom Martell beating Budakov and then Ben Stark losing to Shahar Shenhar.
Right. Now, there was also a pretty good amount of Jund, I believe.
Yeah, we had both Brian Kibler didn't play Jund, but he tested with the 3 guys who did, who were Eric Froelich, Josh Utter-Leighton, and David Ochoa. And then Reed Duke, as usual, or as expected, also played Jund. Yeah. Yeah. The same list, or a modified version of the same list he's been playing for many months at this point.
Now Kibler's deck, he 3-0'd.
He did, with red-green beats.
Yeah, and I mean, it was great. I kind of enjoyed it because, the other decks were more mid-range, more grindy, more control, and his was very assertive. It was just smack you on your head multiple times until you're dead.
Yeah, he has a full 16 haste creatures with Strangroot Geists and Hell Riders and Thundermaw Hellkites and Flinthoof Boars.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And he certainly enjoyed playing it. He was having a great time in the feature match area.
Well, when you go 3-0, you tend to be having a pretty good time.
And then Craig Wesco.
He's
to the surprise of no one.
Yeah, small white creatures, but this time he backed him up with Searing Spears and Burning Earths.
Okay.
Yeah, playing white-red. So it's actually a pretty good call too, because Burning Earth is insane against blue-white-red. It's very good against Jund, but against blue-white-red it's even better.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, Jund has the ability to cast a Thragtusk for free.
Yeah, it's like a free Thragtusk and then Hunt Masters, and then Jund actually plays a few more basics, especially like Reed's list. I saw him with multiple swamps in play.
Okay.
Whereas the blue-white-red list that most of the guys are playing has 1 island.
Right.
And that deck also can't really race, so they're pretty dead if Burning Earth resolves and they're not already ahead.
Yeah. All right, so let's take a look at the scoreboard here. We've got what happened yesterday by the numbers here. And as you can see, we have 3 players at 5-1 at the top of the standings. Reed Duke, Brian Kibler, and Shahar Shenhar. Now, you mentioned that Reed Duke was 5-1. Brian Kibler, 2-1 his draft, 3-0'd Standard.
Yeah. And as did Shahar.
And Shahar did as well. Now, we're going to talk in a few minutes about what that means, because Reed Duke 3-0'd his draft.
He did. He drafted a pretty awesome Black-White Rebels deck.
He did, and we saw him grind,
search out a bunch of blight speakers and go off with a Gleam of Resistance.
Yeah, or multiple, And so we're going to talk about how the tiebreakers work here at the World Championship. It's a little bit different, but let's take a look at a few more of the standings here. Ben Stark, Craig Wescoe are in that second tier, newly inducted Hall of Fame-y Ben Stark, that is. And so he's at 4-2, and Craig Wescoe 4-2. They have to be pretty happy about where they're sitting.
Well, Craig certainly is. He went 2-1 in Constructed and winning his last 2 rounds, actually. But Ben actually went 1-2 in Constructed after 3-0 in his draft. So Ben isn't quite in the spot he was hoping to be after the draft.
That's right. And then there's a big chunk of people in a similar position. So 3-3, 3-3, 3-3, 3-3 for Yuya, Willie, Eric Froelich, and Josh Utter-Layton. And then a bunch of 2-4s for the Ocho, David Ochoa, Shuhei Nakamura, Tom Martell, Li Shitian, and Dmitry Budakov salvaged a pretty rough day for him at 2-4.
Involving the Jace plus 20 cards that we had mentioned yesterday.
Yeah, that was awesome. I was actually a floor reporter for that, and I look over and I see him put Jace in the bin, and I'm like, oh, it must have got burned out or something. And then he starts cutting out 20 cards from the top of his library. That game didn't go much further than that.
No.
But these guys, they've got a tall order today, right? I mean, succeeding at 2-4 coming in means that they're not
likely to make it at 7-5. Some players made it at 7-5 at last year's World Championship, but if they 6-0, they're almost assuredly going to be in the top 4.
Okay, so they know what they need to do.
Yeah, and it starts with 3-0ing the draft.
Now, Martin Yuza.
He, unfortunately, is not going to make it into the top 4, barring some very strange set of circumstances.
Right. So he had a really rough day yesterday. I mean, I saw him. He looked frustrated.
Yeah, he said he lost a couple matches because of mistakes he made, which is not a fun thing to have happen.
No, not at all. And I mean, he's an experienced enough player to recognize when that happens, but at the same time, it's never easy to take.
Yeah, I talked to him afterwards, and he was feeling a little bit better, just because at the end of the day, this is one of the best tournaments to go 0-6 at, in the sense that if he goes 6-0 today, he gets 6 pro points. That's like making the finals of a Grand Prix.
Yeah, so not too bad.
He can still, almost win a Grand Prix just by going 6-0 and doesn't really have to do that much more.
Yeah, I like that mentality too. I mean, I think that is interesting how that changes in a tournament structure where Martin Yuza could come in at 0-6 and be like, hey, I can make something happen from this. I can get some pro points, get my season off to a good start. Maybe somebody like Ben Stark, who had a 3-0 start in the draft, he's more disappointed about being at 4-2 potentially, mentality-wise. All right, we had a chat with Scott Larrabee. He's running the show here about the cumulative tiebreakers. Now, that's not the normal system we're used to.
No, the normal system we're used to is opponent match win percentage, where who you played against, their records are basically what matters for your tiebreaker.
Right. Now, how does cumulative tiebreakers, how is it different from what we're normally used to?
The biggest impetus for the change, according to Scott, and Eric Lauer from R&D is the one who came up with this, is that it doesn't matter how your opponents did. It only matters your own performance, since they wanted something that didn't rely as much on external factors.
Well, that makes a lot of sense.
It does. It's no longer, you play against someone who that now goes 0-4 drop, and it doesn't actually
and that affects you negatively, even though you had no control over that.
Right. So basically, the cumulative tiebreaker system, the earlier you lose, the worse. The faster you get to a point total, the better. Okay. So one of the examples Scott gave us was if you have a person who lost round 1, won rounds 2 and 3, and then rounds 2 and 3, then lost round 4.
Yes.
Versus someone who won their first 2 rounds and then lost their next 2 rounds. The second person has better tiebreakers because they hit 6 points, 2 match wins before the first person.
Okay, so and another example of that is if I start out, let's say 5-0 and then lose a game. Or lose a match, excuse me.
You'll have very good tiebreakers under this system.
Right, where if I start off 0-1 and then win my next 5, I'm behind that person on tiebreakers.
Or if you start off 4-0, lose, then win, you'll still be behind this person because they went 5-0. Basically, the best tiebreakers you can have is to go XO, then lose.
And that's why we see Reed Duke at the top of the standings here.
Because he was 5-0 before losing to Brian Kibler in the last round.
Right, so that's going to be interesting to see how that goes, something that we're trying out here. And I like the fact, there's some justice involved with making it all on you.
And if you look at it, Shahar Shenhar went 1-1 and then went 2-1 and then went 3-0. So he lost in round 2. Okay. Whereas Brian Kibler lost in round 3 of the draft and then went 3-0. So that's why Brian Kibler's in second and Shahar's in third.
All right. Now today we're going to be seeing M14 draft. I'm told that the players are just about ready for us to do that. We're going to be watching the actual drafts. We're going to be bringing that coverage, and there's also Modern later in the day. Yep. So this is going to be exciting. All right, why don't we send it down to the booth right now where we're going to be watching M14 draft. After that, we're going to come back up to the booth, and Luis has an archetype breakdown for M14 Limited that we're going to go through. It's going to be awesome. And as we lead into day 2 of the World Championship here from Amsterdam. Guys, we'll see you in a few minutes.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the booth. I'm Brian David Marshall. I'm here with Zach Hill, and we are about to watch Reed Duke draft Magic 2014 here at the World Championships, round 7. Zach, talk about Reed Duke a little bit here.
Well, it's hard for me to talk about Reed Duke without thinking back to this exact event last year and just how different things are, how night and day Reed's play is, Reed's draft might be. As we think about this, you know, we watched Reed cube draft last year. The idea is the Mox champion, he drafted a lot, and there was a lot of controversy over the way he was picking his cards. And, you know, I think that his record didn't pan out like he'd want it to. We see the exact opposite of that today at this tournament. Reed at the top of the standings, looking very confident, and I think this might be his opportunity to really cement his draft record and come out strong at the end of the day.
Awesome. Well, I think they're ready to open up their pack, so we're going to go down to the floor and see what Reed has in store for us today.
Open the first booster and count that you have 14.
All right. Welcome to the second draft of the Magic the Gathering World Championship. There you see the top table, and there we get a look at Reed Duke, last year's Magic Online champion and the last place finisher last year at the Players Championship, but someone who's rattled off you know, some great early rounds here.
That's exactly right. Now we're going to see him drafting M14 today, not Modern Masters like we looked at yesterday, and a quick Scavenging Ooze edging toward the front of the pack.
You see a giant spider in the pack. Bubbling Cauldron is a card that can do a lot of work in this format.
Yeah, a card that, you know, sacrificing your own guys to gain life, not intuitively very good, but there's some powerful interactions, you know, not just with the cards it has written on it, like the Newt.
Festering Newt, yeah.
But with, like, Active Treason, obviously really powerful to take your opponent's guy, hit them with it, kill it, and gain a bunch of life.
But Scavenging Ooze is a card that's played in Standard, Modern, and Legacy. It's obviously very good, and that's the way he's going to go here.
Yeah, it gains you life. It gets big. It's right on curve. It's hard to deal with in the late game. It only gets better. You know, there's not a turn in the game that you don't want to draw Scavenging Ooze.
Right. It's a 2-drop that if you play it on turn 7, and you just make it huge. Well, there you see Path of Glory or Path of Honor.
Path of one of those generically good white things. And it curves nicely with Scavenging Ooze, and Ooze can gain you life, which can keep you above your starting life total, which turns Path of Bravery all the way on. You see also a Liturgy of Blood going to the front, a nice removal spell. Reed passed Quag Sickness in the last pack, so a decent number of quality black removal spells coming up today.
Right, and he's passing to Brian Kibler.
Now we see Battle Sliver coming to the front. Is Battle Sliver a card you look to take early, Brian?
I mean, if he likes the Sliver archetype, I mean, obviously, you know, maybe feels like he's getting a good price on that he's going to get Slivers late, that it's not respected.
And green, obviously, with the first pick, Ooze puts you nicely into the color of Predatory Sliver and the Mana Weft Sliver, two of the cards that are obviously very good when you have a 5-mana Sliver that makes the rest of your cards bigger.
There you see the Woodborn Behemoth going right to the front of the pack.
I mean, Behemoth, obviously a 4/4 for 5, not terrible. And then the late game turning all the way on to 8. I mean, that and the Ooze, it looks like he's gonna have one of the most powerful late games if he can get to that point.
Right. There's a Groundshaker Sliver back there, but and then we see Seismic Stomp, a card you think people have not really appropriately valued.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. You have a lot of conversations in this format about like how games drop into game stall, or into stalls fairly frequently, and yet.
And there's our Predatory Sliver.
Oh wow, and the Haste Sliver as well, but I think Predatory Sliver the clear pick here. Geyser coming around a little bit late as well.
Volcanic Geyser gets shuffled to the front.
Sometimes you pick power over synergy. Sometimes you pick synergy over power. I kind of want to take Predatory Sliver here, just to sort of.
Well, you're also sending a strong. You're sending a strong message in the other direction.
Right. At the same time, you know, a fireball's a fireball.
And pass.
But yeah, the seismic stop allows you to clear out those ground stalls. It's also really good with just, you know, your big green creatures like the 5/3, the 4/4, along with like Regathan Firecat, a 4/1. It's just really easy to end a game with that card.
There you see Regathan Firecat, a card you were just talking about, the 4/1.
Meow. The wild ricochet, man. You can do some crazy stuff with that card, but it seems hard to just sort of slam it down this early. Are there enough targeted like removal spells, for example, that it's something you could do reliably? Do you think?
I don't. I don't.
No.
I don't see myself taking that very early. I would just rather have a 4/1 curve filler. But,
Yeah,
But Reed takes the wild ricochet.
well, relevantly, blue and black are both very
Yeah,
good.
I mean,
in
we
this
just
format.
saw a bunch of black cards going past. There's Pitchburn Devils.
A card you were talking to me earlier about. This card that so frequently just puts away the games.
Just so
You-
depressing, that card to me. Like, you know, I've stabilized. I'm at 1.
yeah.
Oh, you've got the Pitchburn Devils. There's nothing I can do
I
here.
can't block and I can't not block. So can I get up and walk away from the table, please?
Yeah.
Draft and pass.
All right, he takes the Pitchburn Devils.
Yeah.
So,
So Reed's got a pretty high mana curve right
but
now.
maybe he's hoping that there'll be some Mana Weft Slivers, some Elvish
Sure.
Mystics.
And that is the thing, yeah. With both Mana with Sliver and Mystic, you know, you can accelerate reasonably reliably. in
There's
green.
Ring Flash, a card I know you like and you think is a little disrespected. Another Seismic Stomp, Festering Newt.
Yeah, Reed, you've got to be looking to go into black right now. I mean, you've passed some really good removal spells.
but
You've
he's-
had some deep packs.
But he's got to assume that Kibler's solidly in black, I would think.
That's why you look, man. I've played a lot in the Midwest. You just pass cut some people. And pass them all the goodies and just cut them off.
There's a giant
Wow,
growth and a
really
giant
late
spider.
growth and spider right there. I love me a giant growth. I mean, it's just so easy to set up situations where you, like, normally when you play a combat trick, you have to choose between playing that and developing your board.
Right.
The 1 mana giant growth usually a lot easier to make that, to not have to choose between them.
Right. Also in that pack is a Tenacious Dead, which we saw Bubbling Cauldron earlier, and then that's sort of a recurring source of 4 life a turn.
Yeah.
Get an Angelic Accord and
And we've seen Newts go around the table too. I mean, it'd be interesting to know if Kibler is sort of getting the hookup with all these really late giant spider there.
Pick up.
it does sound like Kibler is grabbing all the black cards. We see Verdenhaven, another form of mana acceleration in green.
I think you really want to take that Haven here. Like, you still have the option of the Sliver deck, even though you only have Battle Slivers so far, and it's nice to be able to capitalize on all
but
the
he's
other
lava
slivers.
axing.
Oh, man. Catch.
Pick up.
So, I mean, Reed's curve continues to be really high.
Draft.
What did he just take?
Just took like the 7 mana sliver.
Oh, okay. He's like drafting. He's drafting the dinosaur deck in Mirrodin. We see a Brindle Boar there.
Yeah, Ground Shaker Sliver. You get to look at all your slivers. Get trampled. 5/5 for 7.
Draft
Sick rate.
and pass the last one. You have 30 seconds to review.
Reed arranges things by curve. It's just like
Two,
starts
two,
at 4.
7.
Yeah. Huh.
So yeah, he really has to want an elf from Mana Weft Sliver here.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and honestly, like, I think, I mean, you're not going to get a rampant growth because it's not in the set, but the 5-drop really wants you to have actual lands in play to really start kind of going crazy. Reed's moving Brindleborn to the front there because he just needs a 3-drop. That's not a card you're really excited to play. I mean, you see Battle Sliver, Pitchburn Devils, Ground Shaker Sliver, Volcanic Geyser. I mean, this is a very top-heavy deck so far.
Would you have considered taking another Giant Spider over the Giant Growth? Like, just it's the ability to sort of like
Stabilize.
hold fast.
I certainly would have considered it, yes. I do like having a giant growth around this early, but in order to really capitalize on that, you need a few more aggressive
Please
guys.
put the cards face down. Open your second booster.
Right, to me, Giant Growths
count
play best
that
with
you have
2 drops.
Right. I think I probably would have taken Predatory Sliver just because I'm greedy, but I think it would have been wrong, and I think taking Fireball is a smart thing to do.
And is it easier to do that when there's not a camera over your shoulder?
Probably. It's easy to do a lot of things when there's not a camera over your shoulder.
There's a Goblin Diplomat,
Diplomats.
an Elvish Mystic.
Wow, and an Outrage. Goblin Diplomat, obviously really good in red-green.
Yeah, just like
green
big
guys.
things that you can make people bang their heads into, but there's a Chandra's Outrage.
Right, hard to argue with a removal spell. He needs the Mystic bad given his curve, but I mean, I think you just hope to get one later.
You can't
take
pass.
a Char. Yeah.
You can't pass a premium removal spell. There we see a Scroll Thief, which is a card people have been talking about a lot in this format.
Yeah, Scroll Thief has been in several core sets, but it seems to be at a premium in this one with Trained, Condor, and Master of Diversions both providing on-curve ways to really push it through. Yeah, Time Up too. Yeah, excellent point.
He does take the Chandra's Outrage premium removal spell. You like we said, can't pass that. Kills a Serra Angel.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of very good 4/4 flyers at the uncommon slot, 4/4s and 4/3s. Is that an Ogre Battle Driver?
That is an Ogre Battle Driver. Just, something about, you have that higher curve, but suddenly they all have haste and +2, +0.
Yeah, it's kind of counterintuitive because, on the one hand, you don't really want another 5-drop. On the other hand, you really like to make up for the time that you lose with such a high curve by having our creatures get huge and gain haste. Hoping that no one casts an Imposing Sovereign against you.
He takes the, Imposing Sovereign. Ruins the Battle Driver plan. Yeah, just the best Hill Giant ever.
So you see a Marauding Maulhorn there, a 4-drop, and a Juggernaut. Literally one of the most powerful commons in the set. It has the upside of not allowing you to forget to attack with it.
Yeah, unless you control an Advocate of the Beast, which could then somehow make you play incorrectly.
Right.
If you're able to put counters on this, then
just hold off. Just hold off. You probably want to D up with your 6/4.
And he does take the Marauding Maulhorn. I mean, 5/3. As Juggernaut has historically been just like a windmill slam pick and limited.
Right. I'm thinking of the Ogre of the Ogre Battle Driver, and that makes me even more excited to have about 400 million Elvish Mystics in my deck, because that means if you draw it late, you're just playing a Spark Elemental that sticks around.
There we see a Hunt the Weak, a Deadly Recluse, which is a premium 2-drop for this deck. Just you're not going to go. His game is all going to be like turn 4, turn 5, turn 6. So Deadly Recluse is just people call it the Green Doomblade.
And pass.
And it essentially is. I mean, this is not going to be a deck where you're playing Grizzly Bears and attacking with them. You want to do stuff on the second turn, but you're looking to survive into the late game now at this point. And Dragon Egg being a really excellent way of doing that.
There's a Seismic Stomp, which seems like it might be okay in this deck too.
I think you'd want exactly one, because you just have so many creatures that hit so hard. Lets you do some math. We see Divination moving to the front, obviously. Card advantage is powerful, but I would expect him to take the Dragon Egg here. Looks like maybe not, though. Okay.
Takes the Disperse.
There's Disperse obviously really good against Reed's larger creatures.
Right.
The more expensive something you return to someone's hand, the more mana they have to pay to play it again.
You ever see a Striking Sliver?
And blue, just in general, really deep in these packs. We're getting word that someone's going green in front of him is actually taking some of those Elvish Mystics. So seeing all this blue in this pack, you've got to sort of say, hey, maybe I'm not in the right colors after all.
But it's not really the premium blue. I mean, it was like Seacoast Drake and Armored Cancrix. And
sure. And not the premium spells, just kind of a very deep pack. Is that a man? Oh, wow. A fairly late Mana Weft Sliver has got to be kind of exactly what Reed wants right now.
I would have already. I know that they haven't said draft yet, but I would have already just slammed that into my pile.
Bam.
Yeah.
All right. Looks like some. Okay, a Plummet.
Plummet is like, a main deckable card in this draft format. The best decks are blue. I think that's safe to say.
Yeah, and even the, white has Sarah Angel, black has Sanger Vampire.
And black has the Death Touch Flyer.
Yep. Nightwing Shade as well.
Yeah.
A lot of good targets for that. We saw Frost Breath in the pack, continuing the trend of pretty late blue cards.
Goblin Shortcutter, Pitchburn Devils, and Verdant Haven.
I kind of see the Verdant Haven here, to be honest with you.
I like that. I like that Shortcutter. I mean, even though it's not going to necessarily be as late game, you're able to push some stuff through, but like just also to trade on.
Just play a Coral Merfolk. I mean, Shortcutter is just an extremely powerful card, or not extremely, but a very powerful card. And, I mean, there's still a whole other pack to go. I mean, it's possible Reed does end up being, especially the second Lava Axe.
He's got double
back
axe
to
now.
the aggressive deck. Yeah.
Crush some Brambles.
BRB, crushing Brambles.
Draft and pass.
Can that card blow up a land?
Yeah, it's target permanent, right?
Ah, there we go.
Non-creature permanent.
Non-creature permanent, yeah.
Yeah, so you can get a Planeswalker with that too.
An incredibly late Infiltrator right there.
And pass 2.
One of my favorite cards. I was a fan of Rummaging Goblin, so Academy Raider, sorry, not Infiltrator. Academy Raider.
Are you reverting to playtest names?
I am, in fact.
45 seconds.
But yeah, now your Rummaging Goblin can deal them damage.
Yeah. And it's got Intimidate, so if you have any kind of equipment or enchantments to auras to enhance your creature, I mean, he can get Mark of the Vampire on that guy.
Oh yeah, no, I'm a big fan of the Raider, and Reed doesn't have that many 3-drops right now, and it's important in a deck with like this high of a top end to be able to discard your top end spells when you can't cast them, and loot into more lands when you can, and loot away extra lands.
The extra lands once you've hit 5 or 6.
Yeah, precisely. I didn't even see that he had a Canyon Minotaur cards.
Yeah, he got that almost like last pick.
Oh yeah, not a spectacular card, obviously, but really important to fill in the curve in a deck like this.
So amazing to see the difference between Canyon Minotaur and Ogre Battle Driver.
You get a lot for an extra red mana.
Yeah. Double red is twice as hard to get.
There you go. Clearly makes sense. You can't. You can splash a Canyon Minotaur. So yeah, we see Plummet there. He's got a Chandra's Outrage as another removal spell, but altogether not that many ways to get stuff off the board. Might be relying upon just having bigger, better threats than his opponent at this point in the game.
Yeah, I was surprised he didn't take the fight card. Also, that seemed like a fine card for his deck, which has a lot of fat.
Yeah. At that point, I think it was pretty awkward on the curve. Like, you really want to cast that off of a 3-drop, and I think his only 3-drop is like a 1/1. So
he didn't even have that one
yet. Yeah, and didn't even have that yet. So a little bit more awkward to use than it sometimes is in a red-green deck, which is like one of the ideal color combinations for it. Air Servant we see, talking about blue cards. Colonian Tusker, 3/3 for 2.
Yeah, Colonian Tusker is about as good as it's going to get for his deck here, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the card's a brick house. It allows him to be pretty aggressive with it, but also it can, sort of gains initiative against opposing 2-drops.
Wow. Opportunity. Like the blue cards that are getting passed here. Air Servant, Opportunity.
Which a really hard pick, actually. I think I take the Servant, but 4 cards is a lot of cards.
Yeah. But not if you read you're staying on your green-red plan and you're taking the beast.
You'll take Disperse, though.
Yeah, there's a Colonian Tusker.
3/3
for GG.
and GG it sometimes is. Reed looking contemplative as he eyes the camera.
Yeah, as an advocate of the beast.
Nice. Sort of tailor-made for this color combination.
There's Wind Raider Sphinx.
Jeez. I thought he was pulling Millstone.
Millstone, like the absolute polar opposite of his 2 lava axes.
Hey, lets you hyper combo a finish.
You can go for the daily double of milling them and lava axe on the stack, activate my Millstone. But he's going to take Advocate of the Beast.
Yeah, I mean, kind of a card you want to be taking right after taking Tusker, too. That is not a bad curve to sort of ease into.
Great artwork, too. Oh, did he just get past a Colonian Hydra?
Well.
And he's looking
Oh,
at
that's a Vastwood Hydra.
Oh, it's a Vastwood Hydra. Yes, it is. Less impressive. Lay of the land,
which is pretty good with that.
But he's got
Pyromancer.
that young Pyromancer, yeah. And the Lay of the Land may very well come all the way back around.
And I think you go for Pyromancer here. I mean, he doesn't have that many instants and sorceries, but like you only need to get one token out of it to get incredible value, and he still does need those early drops.
But you're not thinking about that Hunt of the Week there?
I'm definitely thinking about that. Hunt of the Week.
I kind of like that card right now. I think I like it better than Young Pyromancer, as good as that card is.
Like, Pyromancer makes his giant growth a little bit better, kind of allows him to build back into the aggressive deck that I think he kind of wants to be in this color combination. I think his deck's just looking a lot leaner than it was after Pack 1.
There's a Second Advocate.
Second Advocate, which is what I think you take here. Worm, a really good card, kind of cute with Scavenging Ooze, but...
Oh, yeah.
2 Advocates and the fourth, or the 5/3 and the 3/3... The Tusker, I think you have a lot of upside on your Advocate. What is the Juggernaut? Megantic or not? Too many M words. Marauding Maulhorn.
Marauding Maulhorn, yeah.
M&M, man. Marshall Mathers.
Pick up.
Now I'm going to take to calling that card Slim Shady on the broadcast, and I'm going to get even more incoherent than I normally am.
There's another Predator Sliver. There's a
short cutter back there too.
But there's a
oh wow,
the Witch Stalker.
Yeah, Witch Stalker, just a massive upside trained Armadon when you already don't have that many 3s. You've got a pair of Advocates and your Super Looter, but I think you probably go for Witch Stalker here. There's just a lot of incidental upside, even though it hurts to pass that Predatory Sliver. Yeah, that's what he goes for.
Shuffle and pass.
An Elvish Mystic would actually be the best possible thing in the
so
universe
insane
right
in
now.
his deck.
Witch Stalker, a wolf, not a beast, unfortunately.
It's kind of like a pig wolf to me.
A creature dash pig wolf.
There I see Spore Mound. Active Treason, Verdant Haven. Late Deathgazer.
Yeah. I was just looking at that. It's not like fairly late Ring Flesh.
Yeah.
And
Active Treason's a fine card to be going around this late as well.
Right. He takes the 3/3, but I almost would have taken the Active Treason just because like you have a lot of really good targets for Active Treason in your deck. So, you know, you certainly might play it. And wow, another Wild Ricochet. Oh, Rootwalla, really huge here.
Rootwalla, another giant growth, another Woodborne Behemoth. Sporeman, I mean, I could easily see him playing 18 land in this deck.
Sure.
So the Sporeman might be kind of nice, actually.
That's a really good point.
Draft and pass.
He takes the Rootwalla.
Yeah, got a lot of 3s now.
Yeah, he does. I think he has 5 total 3s.
But coming into this pack, he had exactly a Brindleboar and an Academy Raiders. Oh, and there's a late Elvish Mystic.
That's got to be exactly what he wants, right?
He's actually beaming. Like, I mean, look at his smile. They can't see it, but he's just got a giant smile on his face.
Yeah.
Not anymore, but he did.
He absolutely did. Yeah, and that really rounds out his deck. Reed just so always looks like someone's taking a picture of him. And Thunderstrike, pretty good. He's got 1 giant growth, but I think with young Pyromancer and his pretty aggressive curve that he has now, Thunderstrike actually something that you're not too sad to include in your deck.
Draft.
Quite a bit lower power level than giant growth, though, obviously.
First Strike is
very good.
Underrated. There's another Lava Axe.
Are we going to see the 3 Lava Axe deck just turn really aggressive all of a sudden?
Lava Axe and Millstone in the same pack, actually, but he took the Lava Axe. He didn't go for the mixed strategy.
So we might be looking suddenly at a very different deck from what
Lay
we
of the
saw.
Land did come back around, by the way.
Huh.
And pass.
But he takes the Thunderstrike.
Okay, so he's got up to 2 Thunderstrikes if he wants them.
Demolish, Soul Mender.
Pass 2.
Takes a Demolish. Sideboard card.
Along with that, Brent, wow, late Lightning Talons and a really late Bubbling Cauldron. I think this is a great Lightning Talons deck, though.
Gentlemen, you can get your bags and move through the deck building area.
Okay.
That was an interesting draft to watch. The late Elvish Mystic there was a huge. Yeah. Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm Brian David Marshall. I'm here with Zach Hill. We just watched Reed Duke draft a red-green beast lightning lava axe deck.
Well, yeah, and a deck that really evolved over the course of the draft. I mean, after pack one, it was extremely top heavy. I mean, obviously in draft you always know that you're going to be able to change directions, but it seemed to get leaner and leaner and leaner as the packs moved on. I mean, obviously Reed is thinking about his high curve and is trying to draft that, but by the end of the draft, he looks like he put together really a quite solid deck, a pretty aggressive deck.
Yeah, and I think someone to his left, immediately to his left was green, and in the second pack, he did not pass much green to his right and may have convinced someone on his right to get out of that color. Yeah, because it was flowing steadily in the third pack for him.
Yeah, I mean, and again, interestingly, again, the Mystic's super late, you know, we kept talking about, but he didn't have that many threes at first, didn't have really that many twos, but he went up to like 5 very high-quality 3-drops, and Mystic really just sort of cements that. I mean, if he's on the play and gets to lead with Mystic, I think he's going to just be, you know, very far ahead of his opponent.
It was either the last opportunity or second to last opportunity he had to see an Elvish Mystic.
Yeah, exactly. And, I mean, really, those packs went pretty deep. I mean, we saw playables getting past like 13th and 14th. I mean, we talked about the Canyon Minotaur that I think he may have gotten last or close to last. Again, you're not thrilled to put Canyon Minotaur in your deck, but I've certainly done it many times.
Right. I mean, fortunately for him, he has an Ogre Battle Driver, which is going to be a phenomenal card for him. Suddenly, all those kind of slow later cards become, you know, very powerful. Extra attackers, plus he's got the Young Pyromancer, so suddenly those 1/1 tokens are 3/1 hasty tokens. He's got a Spore Mound he can play, so every time he lays a land, then he gets a 3/1 you know, possible hasty token.
And it makes his Mana Whiff Sliver and Mystic better on top of everything else too that he's using to accelerate into that card. So yeah, I think Battle Driver, definitely one of his premier spells. It's going to be interesting to see if he takes that Lava Axe route and, you know, like with Pyromancer, just tries to hit as hard as he can, finish up on the top end with Lava Axe, or if he just plays a bunch of meaty creatures like you were talking about.
Keep in mind his second pick of the draft, he had the choice between a predatory sliver and a
volcanic geyser.
Yeah.
So he has like 4 spells that can deal giant chunks of damage if that's what he wants to do.
All right. So we're going to take a break. We're going to go watch these guys build their decks, and we're going to send you back to Marshall at the desk.
Hey guys, welcome back to the news desk here. Marshall Sutcliffe with Luis Scott-Vargas. Indeed. We've got a little bit of a chat ahead of us. So we've got a break here. Players are going to go sit down. They're going to be building their decks. They're going to be making the final cuts on their 22 or 23 playables. And Luis, we have some slides. You've worked out a thing for us to kind of walk us through the archetypes for M14 Limited.
Yeah, I mean, even though this is a core set, the last couple of years of core sets have been really awesome in terms of having a good depth for Limited. There's a lot of pretty specific archetypes you can draft in Limited that, you know, the idea is to take a bunch of cards that people don't really want because of power level, but combine them and have the synergies make your deck really, really good.
Yeah, and there's quite a bit of that floating around in M14. We see quite a few different varying power levels, a lot of cards not great on their own, good with other stuff.
Yeah, or even cards that, you know, are decent on their own and then become very, very good when you have the right support cards.
And that's the ideal one. All right, so why don't we dive right into these? We've got a bunch of stuff to go through with you guys here. And let's start off with the first one. It looks like we've got red-black.
Yeah, so this deck is kind of the same deck that was around in M12 or M11 when you had Bloodthrone Vampire, except this time you've got Blood Baron, Gnawing Zombie, and Barrage of Expendables as kind of like the main ways to sacrifice creatures. So the idea with this deck is you have all these cards that they pay you off for sacrificing creatures. I mean, that's what all these cards say. And then you also have some kind of support cards like Vampire Warlord, Bubbling Cauldron, Altar's Reap. And so the idea behind all of these cards is if you sacrifice a creature, whether
Yes.
it's your opponent's or a token, or
a
maybe
little foreshadowing there.
or maybe a creature that comes back, you know, you end up with a Blood Baron as like a 3-mana 6/6 sort of thing. You end up with a 4/2 regenerator. You end up shooting all their guys with Barrage of Expendables.
Yeah, that seems pretty nice. Now, let's take a look at the next slide, and we'll take a look at what rewards you.
Yeah,
here.
the fodder, as I've called it.
The fodder, yes.
Yeah.
So what's the payoff here?
And the payoff here is the biggest one is Active Treason. I mean, there's a reason that people sometimes even just call this the Active Treason deck, because it turns Active Treason from maybe like a burn spell like a tempo card into 3 mana, kill your opponent's best creature, and they take damage equal to its power.
Yeah, also the tempo card part of that. Yeah. So you steal their guy. You attack them with it, presumably, and then you sacrifice it.
There's not much better than like stealing their 4/4, hitting them for 4, and then sacking it to Barrage of Expendables to kill their 1/1.
Yeah,
that sort of thing.
That is pretty sweet. And something to notice here for M14, Active Treason's is at common.
Yeah.
And sometimes these effects will be at uncommon, but you can get them.
Yeah, like in Rise of the Eldrazi, which I've actually been drafting recently.
Same.
Traitorous Urge is uncommon, and that makes it a lot harder to draft that sort of deck.
Yep.
But besides Active Treason, you actually have a fair number of other creatures that you can sacrifice for gain. Like Pitchburn Devils is a really big one, not only because it's actually big, but also because it does a lightning bolt as soon as it leaves. So being able to lightning bolt anything you want at any point, even though it's on the board, like a seal of lightning bolt, is very powerful.
That is very good. And you mentioned it with the sacrifice outlets. Blood Baron gets bigger. 9 zombie, it's not 3 damage, it's now 4. You know, if you happen to be have your opponent in range. Barrage of Expendable, same thing.
Yeah.
You know, you're getting 3 plus something else every time you do it with.
Yeah, you're not just getting the 3. And then another good thing about that is that Pitchburn Devils isn't a card that people really pick all that highly.
Right.
Because in most decks, I mean, it's good, but it's not lightning bolt on demand. And in this deck, it basically is.
Right.
You also have a Festering Newt, which combines very well with a Bubbling Cauldron, and if you're lucky enough to get a Bog Brew Witch.
Right. Now, Festering Newt on its own,
it's reasonable.
It's reasonable, but unexciting.
Yeah, it trades for a 2/2, which is nice. I mean, just having a 1-drop that trades for a 2/2 is not the worst.
Right.
And if they have like a utility creature in play, like that you really need to kill, like if they have, let's say, a Gale Rider Sliver, like a powerful sliver of some kind, having a Festering Newt in play means they can't really attack you with any ground creatures because you can just do 1 point to anything.
Right. Now, but that takes it from okay to all of a sudden the thing gets pretty darn good when you start comboing it with the cards that it was mainly built for. Bubbling Cauldron.
Yeah, but even something like Altar's Reap, it turns Altar's Reap into a divination, and I mean, who doesn't love divination?
Oh, I do love a divination.
Yeah. You've also got Tenacious Dead, and this is actually one of the most powerful enablers for this archetype, because it's not quite reassembling Skeleton, where anytime it died, you could bring it back like turns later even. Tenacious Dead, you have to have the mana up right away, but with Blood Baron, it turns Blood Baron into 2 mana +2/+2.
Right.
With Barrage of Expendables, it turns it into 3 mana, do 1 damage to anything as many times as you want.
Right, so it gives you inevitability. If the board state's stalled out and you have this combo, you're just like, look, I can just keep paying 2 damage, 2 mana per 1 damage.
And you can even block with the Tenacious Dead too. You have like a free blocker while this is all going on.
Oh, that seems pretty good.
Which is pretty nice. And then Molten Birth and Young Pyromancer are both kind of the same thing, but a different aspect where it's not that you want to sacrifice these creatures in particular, it's that you get a lot of them.
Yeah, you can, especially you.
Yeah, well,
I'm sure you just bank on winning the first 2.
I'm no Shahar Shenhar, but my Molten Births do average slightly higher than 3.
Yeah. What do you think Eric Froelich averages for Molten?
One creature per Molten
Just
Birth. Yeah. Somehow he only gets 1 of the tokens and then he loses the fight.
All right, and then Young Pyromancer, a powerful uncommon that also gives you a lot of
And part of the reason is that this deck actually ends up pretty spell heavy, because besides all of these cards, you still want to take all the good black and red removal spells. You still want Chandra's Outrages or Doomblades, that sort of thing.
Now, the question I have about this is, so what's the ultimate win condition? We have a lot of great interactions, most of them dealing with the board state, being able to kill your opponent's creatures. How do you usually finish up?
The main win condition is either the Blood Baron or Vampire Warlord are both fairly good at just killing your opponent. Or just killing all your opponent's creatures. It doesn't really matter how you kill your opponent if they don't have anything in play. And this deck is very removal heavy.
Okay.
Because besides the fact that, again, it can take the shocks and Chandra's Outrages, that anyone can take.
Yeah.
It also has Active Treason and Pitchburn Devils as additional good removal spells.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, it's sort of an interesting twist on a really standard black-red removal type deck. It adds another layer on top of it.
Yeah, and you can have your normal black-red deck and kind of morph into this, because a lot of these cards are very playable just in any normal deck.
Okay.
And then you end up with 2 pieces from one side and 2 from the other, then all of a sudden you've kind of got a themed deck going on.
All right, and let's take a look at the next slide that we have here. This is the one that I like.
Yeah, this is a deck that I can certainly appreciate. Calling it an Archaeomancer control.
Sure.
And the main engine here is that you have the combination of Archaeomancer, Divination, both at common, and then Opportunity at uncommon. And once you have those cards, you can easily pull ahead of your opponent.
I mean, resolving an opportunity has a specific great feeling in limited, like almost really no other,
And Archaeomancer especially is, in the right deck, if you've built around it, it's not just a 2-for-1. I mean, it's that, because you get a 1/2 body out of it too, but it's also kind of like a diabolic tutor for your graveyard. You end up having your wide selection of cards you can bring back.
And this deck is designed to go into the long game, so there will be cards in your graveyard. It's not like you're going to find yourself in a position very often where you just don't have a target for it.
No, it's pretty rare if you've drafted the deck, like, you know, to the point where it wants to be drafted, that you end up having an Archaeomancer that misses.
Okay.
Like, actually, if you looked at Ben Stark's top 8 deck from GP Ramini, he ended up with some kind of weak Archaeomancers because he really couldn't pick up a Shock or Chandra's Outrage that he was really looking for.
I see. Okay.
But if these are the engine that drives the deck.
Yeah, what are we drawing with all these extra cards?
It's actually the premium removal spells are really what you're looking for.
Okay.
And that's one reason that this deck is a little harder to draft than most, is that everyone wants all these cards. So there's a really wide range of them. I mean, I put 7, but there's easily more cards than this that you'd want.
All right, let's take a look at the next slide. We've got a big list of them here, and we'll note that they go into a couple different colors here as well.
Right. It's kind of the Grixis shard, red, black, blue, where even though the other people are also looking for all these cards, the fact that you're willing to play 3 colors, because I think the deck wants to go the long game enough where it's got enough divinations and maybe a Terramorphic Expanse to smooth things out. You also, there's a lot of replaceable parts. I mean, the spell ones are a little higher priority, like Doomblade is actually the best card possible for this archetype.
Right, because it's cheap.
Yeah, the fact that it used to be common is actually kind of outrageous.
It feels a little weird now, doesn't it? It's like, yeah, this actually makes a lot more sense.
The first time I read the M14 spoiler and I saw that it was uncommon, I'm like, actually, yeah, that should be an uncommon.
It's
still that good.
Yes.
So, besides Doomblade, you have like Flames of the Firebrand, Chandra's Outrage, Shock. These are all just red burn spells that really combine well with Archaeomancer, especially since they don't cost very much mana.
Right. Now, what about cards? So, I see you have Quag Sickness. Now, you can't get that back with Archaeomancer, but it's still a solid removal spell.
Yeah, it's still a good spell. Even though you can't get it back, it still kind of does what this deck wants to do, which is just kill all your opponent's creatures at all times.
Now, what about the difference between, like a Shock and a Liturgy of Blood? Something where we have, on one end of the spectrum, a very cheap, efficient removal spell that's aimed at a certain subset of creatures versus a much less efficient but it can hit more stuff like Liturgy of Blood.
Well,
which one would you lean towards more in a deck kind of built around Archaeomancer?
Well, the Liturgy costs 2, because I don't know if you've played spells off Liturgy of Blood, but
I have.
But no, these
you got to build up.
Yeah, these are on the opposite end of the spectrum. It is the 1 mana spell, the 5 mana spell. Shock kills a lot of things, but not everything. Liturgy kills actually everything. Yeah,
so which one do you prefer with the Archaeomancer? Like, are you looking to Archaeomancer and grab the spell and play it that turn, or is it just a matter of getting the card back? Is that all that really matters?
So it's actually pretty contextual. I mean, like most draft things. I'd say in general this deck wants Liturgy of Blood more because it's going to the late game, so it wants answers to all your opponent's creatures.
Okay.
You don't really want to end up in a situation where you know your opponent has a Serra Angel in their deck and you just can't beat it because you have all Shocks.
That's right. Now, so this is similar. We were talking about the black-red archetype. This one is card draw plus removal. How do you end the game?
There are a couple finishers, so we'll take a look at those. We've got a pretty good option. I actually just put some examples here, but there are others. There's plenty of rares that actually work pretty well as finishers. But
these are the ones that you'll see a little bit more often.
Yeah, if you take a look, actually Millstone is one of the funnier finishers because most decks actually can't really take advantage of it.
Oh yeah, and I mean Millstone's an interesting one because your deck. I mean, how far over does your deck have to be before you want to take a Millstone over? Well, like any of these creatures or really any creature that can win.
You're not generally going to want to do that, but the key thing about Millstone is that it actually just kind of wheels all the time.
Yeah, you'll get it back.
I mean, it doesn't attack or block, but it turns games into quite the grind, and you end up being able to win the long games with an unkillable finisher. That's the main advantage it has.
Yeah, it gives you that. Now, Air Servant, Water Servant, and Sengir Vampire, I mean, these are just power uncommons. Water Servant's like Aetherling.
Yeah, in the deck. Aetherling is a good comparison. So kind of the reason, I mean, again, this archetype does rely more on cards that other people want as well, but it is worth noting that if you don't have a couple of the really long game finishers, you're going to need to play more creatures in your deck.
Okay. How many finishers are we talking about in a deck like this? Like, is this deck geared to go so long that you could have 2?
You want generally more than 2. You want like 2 to 4.
Okay.
But if you wouldn't want multiple millstones. The point of millstone is that you can probably just mill them out. And there's actually another one that I want to mention, which is Elixir of Immortality, which is a nice one, especially if you have opportunity where you can really draw through your deck quickly.
That's true. So if you can get your deck in a position such that it can go so long, then you're going to be able to just answer everything that your opponent does, not deck yourself, and they're going to eventually become decked.
Yeah, you've got...
I like that deck. I don't know how often I'll get it.
Yeah, Elixir doesn't look like it combos with Archaeomancer, but it actually kind of does, because the decks that have Archaeomancers kind of want to go to this game and have Elixir. It used to be really, really insane in M11 with 4C.
Yes.
Because 4C digs you 6 cards deep.
Yes,
so.
I remember that one. And then Opportunity. Reasonable win condition, just start pointing it down.
I mean, if you have Elixir and enough removal, you can opportunity your opponent out.
There you go.
It is actually something that's possible.
There you go. All right, I like this deck a lot. It seems like one of the ones that I'll be looking forward to drafting as M14 continues. Let's go on to the next archetype here.
And speaking of the Ben Stark's deck from the top 8 of Armenia, it was actually exactly this deck.
Oh, okay. So talk us through it.
So the idea, I mean, it's called the Scroll Thief Tempo deck, and the reason is that Scroll Thief is by far the most important card.
Okay.
Ben actually had 3 copies of the card, but you sometimes only end up with 2, and if you end up with 1 or 0, you're not really drafting this quite the same deck.
Hard to make claim to the Scroll Thief deck with
right.
1.
You can still kind of draft a red-blue tempo deck, but the real key here is Scroll Thief, because there's so many ways to get Scroll Thief through, and even if you're trading a card to get Scroll Thief through, that actually replaces itself, and then you end up ahead of damage, ahead on the board. So it actually goes a long way.
Okay, so I see you've got Scroll Thief, Archaeomancer, and Trained Condor here on the slide. Trained Condor and Scroll Thief, that makes perfect sense. What's the deal with Archaeomancer? Just value?
Again, this deck ends up very spell heavy.
Yeah.
It doesn't end up with like that many creatures. It ends up with a lot of different spells, and tempo spells with Archaeomancer are actually pretty good.
Yeah.
Because when you end up casting something like a Frost Breath and then Archaeomancering it back, you end up fairly far ahead.
That's right.
If you're converting that tempo into something useful.
Okay, well, let's take a look at those cards. There's a lot of tempo cards here that you're going to use to get ahead and stay ahead.
Yeah, and one of the key ones is actually Time Ebb, because Time Ebb can essentially be a time walk in the right situation. You end up putting their guy on top, and if they don't have a better play and they just do that again, you actually end up going ahead and taking an extra turn and drawing an extra card off Scroll Thief, so you can get multiple pieces of value out of the same card.
Yeah, I like that, and I think that that's one of the things about these tempo cards, right? Is that they're often not worth a card in and of themselves. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. But when you get to cast them twice, now all of a sudden you would be happy to do that.
And again, all these cards are either 1-for-1s or 0-for-1s. Like when you disperse a creature, you're losing a card. I mean, their creature gets returned, but you're actually down a card. They're not down a card.
Exactly.
The difference is if you have a Scroll Thief in play, all of a sudden the card parity is there, but they're down mana because you're probably dispersing things that cost 3 or more.
Now, you said that this deck can exist without Scroll Thief. I mean, what kind of stuff are you looking at there?
If you don't have Scroll Thief, you have to shift the focus of the deck pretty significantly.
Okay. It's
still the same kind of deck. It's still trying to use Disperse, Time Ebb, Frost Breath, that sort of thing. But instead of Scroll Thief, you need a lot of creatures.
Okay.
Because now all of a sudden, instead of trading Disperse for a card and like 2 points of damage, you need to trade it for no card, but like 6 points of damage.
Right, okay.
If you curve out with creatures and then cast Disperse and Time Ebb, then you can actually kill them. Whereas Scroll Thief kind of accomplishes the same thing.
Okay. Now let's take a look at this last slide. You've got some burn spells here. Yeah,
burn is actually an important part here because sometimes you when you're ahead on cards, again, cards like Lob Axe, it lets you trade cards for damage. And the whole purpose of this deck is trading your cards, first you're trading them for life, then you're trading them for damage. You end up being able to exchange cards and mana in a kind of interesting way.
That's really interesting.
You've got a lot of different ways to convert them.
Yeah, I really like that. That's pretty cool. I mean, I guess that if you were to come to me and say, okay, we're going to present you with a world where you get to just draw lots of cards, but they're not going to be first, second pick type cards that often, well, how would that world look? And this is how it would
And that's what this deck's trying to do.
Yeah.
It's trying to draw a lot of like situational, like tempo cards that that are usually card disadvantaged. Like again, Frost Breath and Lava Axe and Disperse are usually cards that you end up down cards.
Yeah.
And this deck's trying to convert those cards into more cards of Scroll Thief, and then eventually those cards into just killing your opponent.
I like this deck.
It's a fun deck. I mean, if you end up with 2 Scroll Thieves in pack 1, you can really go for it.
How early do you have to take Scroll Thief here? I mean, I'm assuming if you pick up like a Chandra's Outrage in your opening opening pack, you're going to want to take that over the Scroll Thief. But
yeah, generally because Outrage is such a powerful card, and it can go into very, very many different decks. But Scroll Thief actually got much, much better in M14.
Okay.
The previous sets it was in, it was good, but not outstanding, just because it didn't get through all that often. But between Trained Condor and then Master of Diversion in white, and you end up with a couple common ways to just get the Scroll Thief through for damage.
I like that.
And that makes it much, much more powerful.
Let's take a look at the next one. What do you got for us? What's the next archetype here for M14?
We've got Slivers. Slivers is a fun one.
The obvious one, I suppose.
It is, but it's actually kind of interesting that it's a little more reliant on rares than I thought it would be.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, because in order to really get paid off for drafting Slivers, you need one of the engine Slivers, which is, this list of Slivers that by themselves make your other Slivers into a pretty unstoppable force.
Okay, so let's take a look at what we have. There's a Megantic Sliver. That's a rare.
Yeah, this is kind of the premier Sliver where it costs a lot of mana, but having a permanent overrun is pretty impressive.
And it's also a 6/6, by the way.
Yeah. So you have Megantic Sliver as kind of like the main one, and it's also in green, which is really important.
Okay.
You also have a Bone Scythe Sliver, which, Double Strike isn't quite +3/+3, but it combines well with a lot of the other Slivers.
Absolutely.
And white, again, one of the main Sliver colors.
Right.
And then you have a Battle Sliver, which is uncommon, luckily. And that at +2/+0, I think it's actually more relevant than the +1/+1 from something like Predatory Sliver.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I think that the hierarchy for these slivers usually does go things that pump power.
How much damage can you do?
Yeah, it's like that's the first question to answer. The rest is like, oh, it has vigilance or flying or whatever. Okay, what else?
Then you also have a Gale Rider Sliver, because giving your whole squad flying lets you just play it, attack with four other creatures, and then they're just dead next turn.
And then they're just dead. Now, interestingly, Gale Rider Sliver, the only blue sliver,
yeah,
and it's also a rare.
Yeah, so you don't see it all that often. I did have it in a draft the other day, and I was very impressed by how it turned out.
I mean, nobody else wants it, right? Like, blue doesn't just randomly pick up a Gale Rider Sliver.
I mean, it is a flying man, but
it is.
But for the most part, no. Most other decks won't want it. And even though you do have to splash it, because it is the only blue sliver, it's generally worth it.
Okay.
And then Thorncaster Sliver is actually one of the sweetest ones. And once you have Thorncaster Sliver, your priority for getting like Hive Stirrings goes way up.
Yeah, you just need numbers.
Yeah, you're not looking at making your slivers good. You just want enough that you can just Goblin Sharpshooter all your opponent's creatures.
Yeah, and that's an interesting one because the first time you look at Thorncaster Sliver, it looks unimpressive. I mean, you're like, Jesus, a 2/2 for 5?
Mana 2/2,
like it's a tough pill to swallow. But if you've got 3 to 4 slivers on the battlefield, your opponent needs a pretty nice board state to not just get ran over.
Yeah, and even if you can't kill all their blockers, killing, maybe their best blocker, then they get to block 1 or 2 of your slivers, and then next turn you get to do the same thing.
Yeah, and then any slivers you draw for the rest of the game are great.
Yeah, so once you have all those, then you actually start looking at the support slivers, and these are the ones you can pick up a little easier here on the next slide.
All right.
You've got Mana Weft Sliver as being the one that lets you cast all your other slivers.
Yeah, so the slivers deck generally 3 colors?
I would say you're generally Naya colors, red, green, white. And then if you're lucky enough to splash one of the other blue or black for the rare slivers, that's okay. But for the most part, red, green, and white are where all the slivers are concentrated.
Okay, so Mana Weft Sliver enables you to play a deck.
Yeah.
What are you casting off of it?
Predatory Sliver is kind of like the best common sliver. The only disadvantage with this is that other decks actually do want it.
Yeah, no, it's Timberpack Wolf or whatever.
Yeah, it's a base Grizzly Bear. If you get 2, they're both 3/3s.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to get those like 7th pick.
You're definitely fighting. Yeah, that was one of the things that I was curious to see how it would play out in M14, because sometimes when you have a linear archetype like slivers, you would assume, well, I'm not the slivers deck, so I don't want that card. But that's just not the case with a lot of these.
Yeah, both because they only affect your own slivers, so there's no worry about that drawback coming up.
Yes.
And because again, these are just efficient creatures in their own right.
Yeah. All right. What's next? Steel Form Sliver.
Steel Form Sliver, just a decent amount of protection. It's just a solid sliver that it makes all your guys a little harder to kill.
Yeah.
You can't when you have a toughness granting sliver in play, that you do have to watch out, because you don't want to get into a combat where all of a sudden they Chandra's Outrage, your Steel Form Sliver, and all your other guys just get scooped up and go to the graveyard.
Block. Oops.
Yeah. So then you have Blur Sliver, which...
What do you think about Blur Sliver?
It's a nice aggressive sliver. It does really reward you for like curving out. And it's actually another card which I've seen people play just in normal decks.
Okay, and the last one is Striking Sliver. Now this one has kind of got a bad rap. What do you think about it?
Well, it's not the best.
It does say sliver
because
on
it is a 1/1, but it is it's a sliver, so it gets all the bonuses from your other slivers. And the fact that if you've got quite the army out, first strike is something that is relevant.
Yeah, I mean, it means that your opponent can rarely attack you on the ground if you've got any number of
which gives
slivers.
you time if you have one of the engine slivers to draw to.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And again, this is a nice one that you'll get 13th sometimes because no one else really is going to play it.
No, this is the one that is the linear archetype that I was talking about earlier. All right, let's take a look at the last one. You called them the filler slivers. I like that.
An exciting name.
Yeah.
But I mean, honestly, most of these slivers are either vanilla or as close to vanilla as you can get. Since you have Hive Stirrings as one of the few cards on the list that doesn't say sliver on it.
Yeah, but it does make slivers.
Yeah, and Hive Stirrings...
Now, how important is that card?
It really depends on what other slivers you have. If you have Battle Sliver or Thorncaster Sliver, it becomes really, really good because each sliver does so much.
Yes.
If you're kind of more on the Predatory Sliver or Blur Sliver plan, it's not quite as effective.
Okay.
I mean, making 2 2/2s for 3 is very good.
Yes.
But 2 1/1s, maybe with haste, is not the end of the world.
Your opponent's not going to be too worried about that.
Yeah.
Now, what about Sliver Construct? It goes into any deck as kind of a gray ogre. Not a particularly exciting card.
No, for the most part, people don't end up wanting to play it. But you'll again be happy to take it if you have enough of the other slivers going on, and it does the trick. I mean, it's still a sliver. At the end of the day, these slivers are trying to fill out your deck just to make sure that you have the critical mass of actual slivers to go along with your engine slivers.
Right.
Since, I mean, as good as Thorncaster Sliver is, you can't really play in a deck with 4 other slivers and expect it to be awesome.
Right. Sentinel Sliver, pretty solid. Another bear, and this one adds a not really huge ability.
It's not huge, but Vigilance plus maybe First Strike, once you get Striking Sliver out as well, it becomes very hard for your opponent to actually do anything.
Yeah. And the last one is Ground Shaker Sliver.
Yeah, this is the boom boom of the Sliver tribe, and even though it does give trample, which is okay, and is a 5/5, which is pretty nice. It costs 7, so you really don't want more than maybe 1 or 2 of these.
Yeah, this one unfortunately lives in the shadow of. Now this one's a common, so fair enough. But it looks. You put Gigantic Sliver against this one, and it's like, well, boo.
Yeah, they're not quite on the same power level.
No, they're not. Okay, so that's slivers. Let's take a look at the next one. Ooh.
So this is a crowd favorite here.
It is. I'm sure people will like this one.
So we've got a mono black, and the first part in drafting mono black is just asking what sort of payoffs there are for drafting mono black.
Because you are taking on some level of risk here, right?
Yeah, you're cutting yourself out of a certain number of playables just because when you open something like a Sarah Angel, maybe you don't get to play it, you don't get to take it.
Right.
But the payoffs are there. Nightmare is the best one, since Nightmare in mono black is a 6-mana 8/8. I mean, it's a 6/6 the turn you play it, then you play a land and attack for 7.
Yeah.
And it's pretty hard to stop.
Yeah, the thing is absolutely insane in that deck. And also, it's interesting because it's kind of a flashy rare, but people really have to look at whether they want that in their deck. Even if you're playing black, you're going to run it, right?
Yeah,
but mono black's the deck that wants
6-mana 3/3 that maybe is a 4/4 later is not the end of the world.
No, you might want to take a removal spell over it, even if you're in black or something.
So if you get a Nightmare like 5th pick, pack 1, or 4th pick, which can happen, I mean, there are enough good commons and uncommons to take over it, then maybe you might want to consider just going in and trying to draft, 17 or 18 swamps.
Now, what about this next card? This one's an uncommon, and it seems like maybe one of the key cards.
Used to be a
the
common,
deck.
actually, in Urza Saga.
Did it really?
Yeah, Corrupt is a nice one. So, again, like Nightmare, if you're playing mono black, this is a Fireball for 8, and you get to gain 8, so it's Drain Life for 8.
Yeah.
But in other colors, it's, does 3, maybe 4 damage at best.
Right, so this is one that you're going to be able to pick up, and it seems like a big payoff.
Yeah, and it's the payoff for Nightmare and Corrupt are pretty far above the other payoffs. So these are the 2 main cards you're looking at. Okay. But it is worth noting that Quag Sickness gets much, much better if you have all swamps.
Kills almost anything.
Yeah, you go from being able to kill, their 2 toughness creatures to being able to kill their 5 toughness creatures.
Yeah, that's pretty good. And again, it's interesting because one of the core tenets to black in the color pie is that it's greedy. It wants you to love only it.
Exactly.
And you get rewarded for that.
To monopolize your behavior.
Yes. And in fact, I think I'm wearing a love me, and it will reward you though for doing so.
Yeah.
Now, what about Nightwing Shade? This is a card that used to be really bad. Is it okay now?
It's okay. It's a good finisher, and part of the reason it's better in this deck than other decks isn't necessarily even because you have all swamps. Because in a deck with half swamps, you can obviously pump Nightshade as well. But It's because it fits the playstyle of this deck, which is generally to try to kill most of your opponent's creatures and finish them in a couple big hits with a, well, ideally a Nightmare, but if you don't have that, a Nightwing Shade.
And then maybe a Corrupt to end the game.
Yeah, a nice little Corrupt for 7.
Yeah, the old Corrupt for 7. All right, let's take a look at the next slide. This is something that we would expect from a mono black deck. It's the removal.
And black is good at removing creatures, and again, Doomblade tops the list just because Doomblade is just so efficient.
Yes.
But Liturgy of Blood is actually better in this deck than most because adding triple black is something you can actually take advantage of.
you can do the old Liturgy of Blood, Quag Sickness.
Yeah, or I mean that's the combo. Liturgy of Blood, Blood Baron actually works out pretty well. The real combo is Grim Harvest, the rare that brings their guy back from the graveyard.
Oh yeah,
so Liturgy to kill their guy.
Oh, I like that. I never thought of that.
Yeah, and then you also have Deathgaze, Cockatrice, and Ringflesh as pretty efficient removal spells. They both remove creatures in their own way, though not quite as unconditional as Doomblade.
What do you think about Deathgaze Cockatrice in general?
It's a good card.
Yeah.
It does what you want it to do. It hits them for 2, reasonably consistently, and can trade for anything.
Okay.
Its biggest vulnerability is actually shock.
Okay, yeah.
Is that you're paying 4 mana for a creature that just gets shocked.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
Yeah, one of the key things about mono black is that in order to draft this deck, you are often going to have to play like 18 land, sometimes even 19, and take a slight hit in card quality. Your last couple cards are not going to be great.
Those 20 to 23rd cards are going to be a little sketchy. Yeah,
sometimes you end up playing like Dark Favors that maybe you wouldn't have played otherwise, and that sort of thing, just because you're cutting yourself off from 4 of the 5 colors in the set.
Right, but you're getting rewarded by having ultimate consistency.
Yeah, you never get color screwed.
You never get color screwed ever, and you also have a situation where the cards that you're playing get much better because you
end up playing with cards that are pretty unfair. I mean, 6 mana to drain life them for the equal to number of lands you have, or a 6 mana 8/8. These are cards that you don't really get otherwise, so it is worth the sacrifice.
And that's worth noting. I mean, if you go mono red in this set, which is difficult to do, but if you did, you would have the consistency the same as the mono black deck, but it's not like your cards get better because you're mono red.
This isn't like Zendikar where Spire Barrage, does 1 for each mountain you have.
Yeah.
So that sort of card does reward you. You do have to look at what the payoffs are when making these decisions.
Sure. All right, let's take a look at the next one. What do you have for us here?
This is actually, it sounds kind of funny, but it's actually a deck.
Oh, it is actually a deck. This isn't a working theory. This is a proven.
Black-White Auras, which actually kind of morphs into Black-White Auras / Life Gain, so it sounds like one of the more impressive decks you can come up with, I'm sure. But basically, the idea of this deck is you've got Blightcaster, Oromancer, and Angelic Accord, and these 3 cards kind of drive you to want to play a different selection of cards than you would normally.
Okay, now do they all go in the same deck?
They can, yeah.
Okay.
For sure, Blightcaster and Oromancer, pair off well.
Yes.
Because once you have Blightcaster out, all your enchantments that otherwise would have been maybe not the best also become disfigures just for free.
Yes, yeah, and that's really good. And plus, he's also a reasonable 2/3 for 4. He can hold down the ground pretty decently. You're not excited about those stats, but it certainly could be worse.
No, I mean, a Blightcaster by himself is actually okay.
Yeah.
And once you have it out, your opponent actually has to respect the fact that you are playing enchantments. I mean, your opponent's not going to assume you played a Blightcaster for no reason.
Just as a 2/3.
So sometimes that'll change either what cards they play or what order they play their cards, which is a little bit of an advantage for you.
That's right. Now let's take a look at the auras that you're going to be casting in this deck here.
So the main one is Passivism, followed by Quag Sickness.
Yeah. Now, is Quag Sickness actually better in this deck because you can get it back with Oromancer?
That is the best combo with it, and depending on how many Oromancers you have, I actually would make that pick. Once you have 2+ Oromancers, you can really think about taking Quag Sickness over Passivism.
Because Passivism often just sits there on the battlefield, locking down the creature.
Yeah, I mean, you're not expecting it to go anywhere.
Right.
But it is the white Doomblade, so.
Yeah, there's a green, white, and a black Doomblade in this set.
Exactly. But Quag Sickness, Oromancer, and that's especially good with Blightcaster, as it's just this whole big loop here that you can go off with.
Wow, that's really good.
Yeah, and then Mark of the Vampire kind of plays double duty here, because not only does it trigger Blightcaster, it's also good with Oromancer because the creature, often does die, otherwise you just win.
Right.
And then it also works very well with Angelic Accord, which is another card you can build your deck around.
Okay, now you've got a couple at the end here that are less powerful than this first group. Yeah. Are these cards that you need to include in the deck just to get that synergy going with the Blightcasters, make your Oromancers better, or are they good on their own in this deck?
I mean, they're not my favorite, but they both kind of do the jobs they're supposed to do. They both work very well with lifelink creatures, and actually both of them combined with a lifelink creature will gain you the 4 life you need to trigger Angelic Accord. Yeah,
that's nice. Divine Favor awkwardly gives you 3 life gain, so you don't get the auto trigger. So
you have to put it on a lifelink creature and then get the extra 1.
Child of Night has to pick up the Divine Favor before that.
But Dark Favor just does enough damage that it does it by itself.
Okay.
And then again, with enough Oromancers and Blightcasters in your deck, then you're getting a ton of value out of these cards.
Okay, let's take a look at the life gain. Now, I'm assuming that this is kind of pointing back to that Angelica
Yeah,
Chord.
Angelica Chord is a card that very, very few decks can ever use. It's a hard card to use, but if you actually do, the payoff is insane. I mean, you're getting an angel every turn.
Yeah, and once you get that first angel, you know, you've paid 4 mana for a 4/4 angel, and the game, I mean, geez, that's already really, really good, and there might even be more to come.
Right, and especially if you have like Child of Night or Dawnstrike Paladin. They're both only 2 power to begin with, but there are multiple auras that kind of get them up to 4.
Yes.
And once you do, you're getting multiple angels, and that's pretty insane.
Yeah, and it's nice too. I mean, you have options with that as well. Sometimes you play a Child of Night early in the game, it attacks for a few times, and then it kind of ends up sitting back.
Right.
You get a Dawnstrike Paladin later, you can slam Angelica Chord, attack with both, say, okay, I'm going to lose my Child of Night, but I'm going to get a 4/4 angel.
Exactly, and trading a Child of Night for a 4/4 angel is very good.
Would do.
So then you also have Congregate, which is not a card most decks want to play.
No.
But there's 2 things here. One, it actually is a powerful card.
It does gain you a lot of life.
Yeah, some games, you know, I've had many games where it's like, well, I'm going to win unless they have Congregate, but, you know, no one plays that card.
Yes.
But if you do actually have it in your deck, sometimes you will draw it and gain 12 or 16 life off it, and that is very good.
Okay.
And then also, obviously, it makes an angel. And once you're making an angel, you've got your Loxodon Hierarch.
Yeah.
you get a bunch of life and make a 4/4.
Now, the downside that occurs to me with this, though, is that you are also playing quite a bit of removal. Like, if you get a Quag Sickness looping and maybe take out a few things with Blightcaster, that's going to make the Congregate worse.
Yeah. And that's not that big of a deal because you end up, if you don't have to use it because they don't have very many creatures in play, it's not the end of the world.
You're probably in a
And you
spot.
probably wanted to save it for Angelica Chord anyway, because you really shouldn't play Congregate unless you have Angelica Chord.
And it's hard to imagine a scenario where you're going to play Congregate and not gain at least 4 life.
Yeah, that is pretty tough.
Yeah.
The next couple are not quite as powerful, but if you have 2 Angelica Chords, I would main deck a Solemn Offering pretty much any time.
Yeah.
There are enough auras running around on your opponent's side.
There's a lot of auras.
Plus artifacts that you can blow up. And again, if you have Angelica Chord in play, it's not the worst to Solemn Offering your own card.
Your Angelica
Well,
Chord?
not your Angelica Chord, but I would not recommend that one.
But your own
But killing like a Divine Favor and gaining 4 is actually worth putting an angel into play.
Absolutely. What about this last one? This is the big 6-drop, the Stonehorn Chanter.
Yeah, the rhino in the room.
He's sitting with his arms folded just off camera.
Exactly. Yeah, it is you know, a little heavy on the curve. But once you have Angelica Chord in play, just paying 6 and you know, getting an angel, and if your opponent wants to trade for it, they're usually going to have to trade 1 or 2 cards.
Yeah,
it's not like a Child of the Night, which they can get for free.
It's still a 4/4, and yeah, giving a Vigilance and Lifelink is pretty sweet too.
Yeah, so it's overall this deck is a little harder to put together. The Blightcaster part is pretty easy because most of the auras kind of stand on their own, but once you have the Angelica Chord, it's a little trickier to make everything work. So I'd recommend really trying to get like 2 Angelica Chords late and then trying to draft your deck around it.
All right, so let's say I'm at home right now. I'm watching coverage.
I bet you're here though.
Yeah, and I fire up my computer, I get on Magic Online, and I'm like, I'm going to get into an M14 draft. I open an Angelica Chord and some other decent card. Is my plan to take that and move in, or is my plan to let it wheel?
I would probably try and let it wheel. If anyone else wants it at the table, you're not going to be able to draft the deck because you're going to fight over the same number of cards.
Okay.
And it can often wheel, so I think it's a pretty safe bet. Like so far, I've been able to wheel Angelica Chord pretty much any time I wanted it.
Yeah.
I mean, if you see it like 6th pick, obviously don't try to get it 14th.
Right.
But if you see it 6th, you can actually pick it up and then kind of draft your deck around it.
Okay.
You usually have to see the Angelica Chord kind of either in pack 1 or early pack 2 to really have enough time to react to it.
Okay, let's go to the last one here.
And this deck is maybe not quite as complicated as the rest.
No, but I think that this one really does deserve a slot here on your metagame breakdown because it really is a deck.
And one thing that's a little different here is that a lot of sets, this is not really a deck you should try to draft. Like the green does not usually stand on its own very much. It's not usually the driving force behind a lot of decks.
No, it usually represents the creature side of your deck, and then you need to support that with some removal, some tempo,
and you have green as
draw.
like color fixing in order to play other colors good cards.
Yes, and that usually has a nice marriage. But in this deck, in this set, you can actually do it pretty nicely here. So
yeah, and part of the reason is that you end up with a lot of really, really efficient creatures. They're just vanilla creatures, but the stats on them are so outrageous that it actually is very, very good.
Yeah, let's take a look at the monsters here. We've got, we've got one of the more efficient cards printed in a while, Colonian
Tusker is a 2-mana 3/3, which is not a card you would like. When they printed Watchwolf, it was in 2 colors.
Yes.
And it was like, wow, this is a big deal.
Yeah,
so.
and this one's actually easier to do. And we've also got Rootwalla.
Yeah, Rootwalla is, all the way back from Tempest, but a 3-mana 4/4 essentially is very strong. And a cool thing about Root Wall is you can often just attack it with it on turn 4.
Yeah.
And your opponent can't block even though you don't want to pump it.
No, yeah, we call that threat of activation. Just that it has that text on the card basically prevents it from being blocked in a lot of situations, even though you had no intention of ever putting the mana into it.
Yeah, and then speaking of 4/4s, Rumbling Bailiff is actually just a 4/4 and for 4 at common, which is, again, pretty outstanding.
It really is. And I'm really happy to see this in green, too, because this is what I think of when I think of green. And sometimes I'm like, why do I have to pay 5 mana for a 4/4 in green? I want to get my 4/4s for 4 here.
Yeah, and this is the card that's so far above the curve that when you cast it, you're kind of ahead of your opponent, even if not much else has happened.
Yes.
It's one of the cards that they have to use their premium removal spells on because it's really hard to kill.
It is, and it's very hard to deal with in combat. Yeah. Woodborn Behemoth, I've been really impressed by this guy.
Yeah, this is kind of on the other end where you're paying 5 for a 4/4, but later in the game it becomes insane.
Yes, and I've had a lot of board states where things have kind of stalled out a bit. And I've got 2 more land drops to go, and I'll just sit here and wait until I hit them and then just bash.
Yeah, like when you play it on turn 4, if you have Elvish Mystic, or turn 5, it can usually just attack through their creatures.
Yes.
Then by turn 6, maybe it can't, but then you just wait till turn 8 or 9, and then you attack for 8.
Yeah, I love that.
And then the last one is the Green Corrupt.
Yeah. Is that what you call it?
Yeah, something like that.
All right, the Green Corrupt is Howl of the Night Pack.
Yeah, and this is like Corrupt in a deck that makes 7 2/2s. It's insane.
Yeah, how many forests do you want to run before until you're pretty happy running?
I've actually run it at like 10 forests and been pretty happy.
Okay.
Which means you can play it in a solid 2-color deck.
Yeah.
If you make 4 wolves off it, that's already pretty good.
Yeah, and it's really nice because since it's not giving you an 8/8, it's giving you 4 2/2s. That blocks much better and gives you more options as far as stabilizing your board.
You're not 1 Doomblade away from losing all your creatures.
Exactly, and I like that a lot. All right, what's next here? Ramp?
We got Ramp and Support is kind of the cards that make all these other cards work.
Oh man, I love this slide right here. This has some of my favorite cards in this set.
The Green Doomblade?
The Green Doomblade's the one that jumps out, yeah.
Elvish Mystic is the most important of these, just because playing your, Rumbling Bailiff on turn 3 is so much better. If you go turn 1 Elvish Mystic, turn 2 Root Wall, turn 3 Rumbling Bailiff, it's pretty hard for your opponent to win.
It's very, very, especially if you're on the play. Now, how many Elvish Mystic would you want to have in a deck like this?
How many can you draft?
Let's say you had access to 5 of them.
I would play all 5 probably.
Okay.
And for every 2 Elvish Mystics, you can usually cut a land too.
Okay.
So if you had 5 Elvish Mystics, I would be pretty happy playing like 15 land.
Okay.
Which
nice. I do like that, yeah.
15 land, 5 Elvish Mystics, and 20 Rumbling Bailiffs.
Now, next we've got a Giant Spider, which is actually, interestingly, in M14, there's 2 Reach Spiders available for green.
Yeah, this is the Green Chandra's Outrage, but...
I like that, 4 and a 2.
Yeah, but Giant Spider and Deadly Recluse both are very good at keeping you alive. And because if you look at Rumbling Bailiff, there aren't very many things that'll kill you unless they fly.
That's right, and Deadly Recluse, we have a joke on the podcast that he always gets his man, and what we're saying by that is it's always going to take a good card from your opponent's deck to deal with it.
It's pretty hard to avoid doing that.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, the first time somebody Doomblades your Deadly Recluse, you're like, maybe this is a really good card.
Exactly.
And it's felt particularly well positioned in M14 for me as well.
Yeah, I've been pretty happy how Green's played out, having the multiple spiders.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Advocate of the Beast, interesting card in M14.
Yeah, it's one of the few tribal cards.
Yeah,
besides Slithers,
even though I think there's 3 beasts in the format.
Yeah,
there's Rumbling Bailiff, there's Marauding Maulhorn, and I think Garrick's.
Oh, well, there's Colonian Tusker.
And Tusker, right? So 4, I believe, and Garrick's Horde,
which doesn't need the counters all that much.
No, the 7/7 Trampler, but so there's not a whole lot going on, but we do have a 2/3 for 3 here as well.
Yeah, it's a 2/3 for 3, which is already reasonable. And then if you have one of the Tuskers or Rumbling Bailiffs, which you end up with often, it does, make them pretty unstoppable very quickly.
All right, let's take a quick look at our last slide. We've got some pump spells there.
Yeah, and this is something you expect Green to have quite a few of as well.
I mean, these are the kind of the ones that we expect to see here. Giant Growth. Enlarge is a specifically unique one.
Yeah, Giant Growth is the green lightning bolt, but
yes.
And Enlarge is the new take on Overrun, which doesn't make all their guys block, but it does basically kill their worst guy and do like 5 or 6 damage to them, if not more.
That's right. Trollhide, Ranger's Guile, and Hunt of the Weak, all kind of mid-level pump spells.
Yeah, and Hunt for the Weak especially good at killing the utility creatures Green otherwise would have trouble with.
Yeah, I like that one a lot as a good tempo play. Okay, I am told that we are ready right now to go back to more actual live Magic. Luis, thanks for that. Hopefully we have a nice little setup here for what we're going into, which is M14 draft. We might even see some of these archetypes in play right now. So this is going to be great.
I suspect the black-white life gain, maybe not. But
yeah, that was tough to get. I'd like to see mono black or the green deck, and any of the blue decks, of course, is the ones that I want to see the most.
Of course.
Yes. Okay, so right now we're going to head back down over to the booth to bring you more action here from the World Championship in Amsterdam. We'll see you guys in a little bit.